Hey there, it's Jason with the Marketing Podcast Network. Real quick, I want to make sure you know that the world's leading B2B Marketing Expo is returning to the Los Angeles Convention Center on March 21st and 22nd. It's high time we got back together to learn, see the latest technologies and solutions, and network, right? Join thousands of marketing professionals just like you to learn from over 250 industry expert speakers, educational masterclasses, and over 300 exhibitors. And this year, your ticket also gets you into the Sales Innovation Expo and the Marketing and Advertising Expo. So it's like 3 conferences in one. It's March 21st and 22nd at the Los Angeles Convention Center. Go to b2bmarketingexpo.us to register. That's b2bmarketingexpo.us. The Marketing Podcast Network is a proud partner of the B2B Marketing Expo for 2023. We'll see you in LA.
As a business-to-business marketer, your needs are unique. B2B buying cycles are long, and your customers face incredibly complex decisions. Isn't it time you had a marketing platform built specifically for you? LinkedIn ads empower marketers with solutions for you and your customers. LinkedIn ads allow you to build the right relationships, drive results, and reach your customers in a respectful environment. On LinkedIn, you'll have direct access to and build relationships with decision makers. Of the 875 million users on the network, 180 million are senior-level executives, 10 million are C-level executives. You will also be able to drive results with targeting and measurement tools built specifically for B2B. And they work. Audiences exposed to brand messages on LinkedIn are 6 times more likely to convert. LinkedIn ads also ranked number 1 for security, community, and ad experience as part of Business Insider's Digital Trust Study. Here at Sway Group, LinkedIn is a pivotal part of our day-to-day and is just absolutely vital for building relationships with clients and with our employees. Make B2B marketing everything it can be and get a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome to The Art of Sway. This is a podcast that brings you inside the world of marketing through the lens of influence. I'm your host, Danielle Wiley. Each week, through candid conversations with industry insiders, we will uncover how influencer marketing is making an impact across all consumer buying habits and is changing the way we talk to each other. Let's dive in. It was so great to catch up with Rebecca. She was one of the first 25 bloggers on the Sway Group roster. So I have known her for a long time and always loved working with her and have really missed hearing her voice. We had a really amazing conversation talking about the heyday of mom blogging, whether or not our kids survived all the scrutiny and coverage that they got back in those days, and of course, so much about the vulnerability and honesty of her groundbreaking new memoir, which I hope you all will read as soon as you can. Please enjoy. Rebecca Woolf has worked as a freelance writer since age 16, when she became a leading contributor to the hit 90s book series Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul and its subsequent Teen Love series books. Since then, she has contributed to numerous publications, websites, and anthologies, most notably her own award-winning personal blog, Girls Gone Child. Woolf has contributed dozens of personal essays to publications both on and offline, including Refinery 29, Huffington Post, Parenting, and Romper. She has appeared on CNN and NPR and has been featured in the New York Times, Time Magazine, and New York Mag. In 2008, Woolf authored her first memoir, Rockabye, From Wild to Child, and was one of 3 bloggers to launch parenting destination Babbel.com, later acquired by Disney. Her latest book, All of This, A Memoir of Death and Desire, came out on August 16th of this year. So, hi and welcome.
Hi.
It's great to see you. We were just saying it's been forever.
It has been forever. It's kind of amazing because I feel like we've now passed the generation. We've now raised the children that we started writing about. And it's this bizarre thing where we've basically become sort of these, I don't know, I feel like such a boomer.
Totally.
You know?
I literally listened to a podcast this morning called the grandma, or not podcast, a playlist called the grandma playlist on Spotify. And it was get your cardigan, think coastal grandma. And I was this is perfect for me.
Yeah, it's wild. Like I'm watching everyone's kids go off to college. I think your oldest is now a senior too. He's Archer's age, right? Aren't our kids?
He's my youngest. So
I mean,
my
sorry, that's
daughter
what I mean.
is,
Yeah, you're youngest.
yeah.
I know she's in college.
She's
and
in
then
college and then he's a senior.
Yeah. So
crazy. Nuts. And I just saw there was that article. It was so much fun. That article last week in Romper interviewing all the kids.
It was really sweet. And my kids were like, because I had asked them when Margaret reached out, she's like, can I interview your kids? And I was like, let me see if they'd be down. And they were. They're like, totally, you can interview us. And they didn't want me to hear them. So like they were in their own room. So it was so cute reading it. And like, especially reading it, like she published it like a couple of days after my book came out. And, my daughter was like, it's so her, like it's so the way she rolls, which is like, my mom's like, leave her alone. Like she's so protective of me and like she will get in. She's gotten in the comments before and fought with people.
Oh my goodness.
And her whole thing was just like sort of just like being like so flippant about people and being like, my mom, like leave her alone. Like she's brave or whatever she said. And I was like, oh. Anyway, I was honored.
For those who didn't see it, this was an article on Romper, and Margaret was the writer, and she interviewed the kids of some of the biggest mom bloggers from when this whole thing all started. So clearly we didn't ruin them by writing about them.
I know. It's so funny. But it's always the way, right? It's like everyone's fear. It's the people who are closest to the thing that are always kind of like, they're not fazed by it.
Right.
It's not a big deal to them because it never needed to be or something.
Right.
Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like there wasn't I don't know. It has
they weren't reading the commentary about it. They weren't analyzing whether it was okay or not. It was just their life.
Right.
And you're a writer and you share.
And I think there's a difference between being respecting your children's boundaries. And I think for a lot of us in the beginning, that was part of it. Like you were writing about your experiences, but you were also aware of your children being their own people. And I feel like it was very respectful of the boundaries of our children. I know there was criticism, which is why she wrote the article, but I don't know, it always felt really loving and supportive and just about women sharing their experiences.
Yeah, we've been talking about this quite a bit on the podcast, just how it was a way for all of us to connect and share our experiences and show others the realness of what we were all going through and allowing people to feel like they weren't alone. We didn't start our blogs to make money.
Right.
Initially, it was just to write and to share. So like any accusations of being exploitative were like kind of like backwards and mixed up because money wasn't there.
Totally.
When you started writing.
Yeah. And I don't think people realize that. I don't think people realize that the beginning of, influencer culture, and the reason why it is influencer culture is because capitalism, marketing people realized that our stories were valid and that talking openly about our experiences were worth something. And sort of, ironically or not so ironically as it happens, the more money gets involved, the less authentic the stories are, right? So in the beginning, it was this really sort of punk rock space. We were making zines, we were doing our own HTML. We were like hiring each other to do our banners. Like it was like this, it felt like this co-op of just women talking about their experiences and supporting each other. And like, we all had blog roles. We all linked to each other's stuff. Like there was no competition. It was like all about support.
I miss the blog rolls.
Yeah. Right. I know like your RSS feeds and your blog rolls and like waking up every morning and clicking all the links in your sidebar to see what everyone was up to was like really, yeah. I mean, I didn't have any friends who had children when my son was born. So that was my community. That was my only community. And I think it was that way for a lot of us. I think we only had that online community. And I don't know what I would have done without it.
One of the things I highlighted in your book, and we're going to get to your book for sure, but one of the things I highlighted that's not even like really what the book was about was you talked about how in the early days you were one of the first ones like making six figures and you kind of started killing it way before a lot of other people did. What was that like? Because I remember, there was so much controversy about, to our point, about making money, like people getting angry if you dared to put a banner ad on your blog. And like, you're talking big money that you were you were supporting your family.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I said no to like half of what I was offered in those early days. Like I never worked with McDonald's. I never worked with Walmart. Like some of the really the sponsors with the biggest budgets, I said no to. So I said no to like tens of thousands of dollars, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years, because I did not feel comfortable working with a brand that I would not myself use, promote, frequent, whatever. That was really important to me. I was always like very much like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it on my terms and I'm going to do this ethically. So I felt like that felt really important to me. And I was fortunate enough to be at a level, or at least at the right place at the right time, where if I said no to Walmart, I could say yes to Target, right?
Right.
But I think for that reason, my audience trusted me because I wasn't going to recommend something or work with a sponsor unless it was something that I was like down with. And I really think that made all the difference in those days. I think it was very obvious to see who worked that way and who was just like willy-nilly going with everybody. Like where you'd have like a vegan blogger who was suddenly like promoting some sort of, like roast beef alliance or whatever. Like there was stuff that was going on, and it was like, how?
There was like this controversy because there was a blog network that hired a bunch of bloggers to write about the high fructose corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup. And then like a week later hired the same bloggers to write about no corn syrup ketchup.
Stop.
From one of the ketchup brands. I mean, I was like losing my mind. It did a lot, I think, to kind of take all of us down, like take the whole industry.
I agree.
Right? Like even if you are turning down money and being cautious about what you take on and being ethical about it, that there are such high profile campaigns going on that are so clearly just bullshit.
Yeah.
And, copying and pasting of a press release.
Yep.
It hurt everyone. And it was like there was so much money flying around in those days, and people were like hoovering it up.
Oh, totally. And it was really hard to say no. Like I remember having these conversations and being like in tears, being like, oh my God, I really could use that $15,000. And yet I'm like, but if I take the $15,000 from McDonald's, I can't do it. I'm writing about my life. Like I can't frame my life in something that doesn't feel right to me. And also like you amass an audience, people come to you. I really feel like I have felt this way for like the last 20 years, having an audience. Like I'd feel like lying to them. I couldn't sleep at night, or trying to trick them or trying to convince them to do something that just it's like very vulnerable to be writing about your life, and you want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable and seen, and that it's authentic to who you are. And that, I don't know, I couldn't have done it. But it was really hard saying no to that money, especially when I needed that money. I mean, my house was about to be taken away, and I was like, it was like shit like that. Like it was not like, oh, like I can't go shopping this weekend. It was like, I'm going to lose my house or like take this, you know what I mean? Like it was like the stakes were high.
Yeah, no, there were stakes. Yeah. And I also think there's a difference. Like you've talked a lot about the authenticity of what you were sharing and how you have always been so vulnerable in what you share and what you put out there. And I think that one, it makes it more important what you choose to say yes and say no to. But I think it made your sponsored content so much more effective. I mean, I remember we hired you once for a campaign and you wrote, there were these little baby lederhosen or something. It was like a used clothes.
Oh, yeah.
Something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They were very cute, but like they sold out instantly, like because you were speaking so authentically and sharing so much that was so real. Like it comes through, and I kind of ironically, it sells product and works so much better commercially than something that isn't.
Yeah. Well, you can tell there's a difference between a sponsored post. And I actually feel I will give myself snaps. Like I feel like I was like, all right, like I think I did like a campaign with almonds forever, like months and months and months. And like people were like, oh my God, I like look forward to your almond posts. And I was like, oh, good, because I'm getting paid for them, and I want to get paid for them, but I also don't want people to be like, ugh, she's a fucking another almond post.
No, that was really the art of you guys all created sponsored posts. It wasn't a thing before that. And there were not that many. I mean, that's back when we had like a roster of bloggers. There were not that many who could be so artful writing about an almond or a set of baby lederhosen.
Oh, baby lederhosen. And those were the days.
It's funny. Sometimes I guest lecture at business schools, like teaching. So weird, teaching students about influencer marketing. And we do this. I have this like set of slides, and it's like a retrospective, like 10 years ago versus now. And we talk about just like a number of different things, just like the technologies that are available. I mean, there are a lot of obvious things that have changed in the last 10 years. But one of the things we talk about is the photography. And I have a picture of you. I think it was an Ergo Baby campaign that you did, and you were pregnant with the twins. Super, super pregnant.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a photo of you like standing in front of, maybe it wasn't Ergo Baby because you weren't having to carry them yet, whatever it was, but you're like super, super pregnant and you're standing in front of your door of your house. And it's just like a real photo.
Yeah.
It's like a real life photo of Rebecca. And then I kind of like superimpose it next to a photo from now, and it's like perfectly lit.
Right.
And the baby looks,
oh, totally.
Like everything. And I mean, there probably was a ring light and maybe even a hired photographer. Like it's so different now.
I mean, it's so different now that I can't even look at it because I don't even know what to do with it. To me, it's just like, it makes me feel sad. I'm like, oh, because it felt like it was kind of like the golden age. It was a really kind of such a finite amount of time. I mean, I don't even know how many years it was, 6 years where it was like really, where everything was working. I don't know, 4 years. Like it was a very short amount of time, but it just felt honest, and it felt really beautiful. Like it did. It felt, people were, I mean, you got your trolls and you had your people that said terrible things. I mean, I heard every possible terrible thing in those years, just as much as I heard all the wonderful things. But it's true. It's like they looked like people, and their children looked like children. And, they had like messy hair and like shit all over their face. And now it's like you have like matching outfits, and everyone's like in a line, and everyone's like from tallest to shortest. And like on the count of 3, we're all going to like jump or whatever. Like, and it's just, there's no there. There's just no there. And how does that make people feel whose lives are full of there? I mean, which is all of us. But again, like I also realize that I'm not the audience anymore. So I'm like, do I sound like, again, like a boomer who's like, get off my lawn?
That's the theme of this. We'll title this podcast. 2 boomers chit chat.
Because I also want to like, look, good for you. Like do your thing. Like I don't want to ever judge or criticize how they do what they do. I just do feel like, oh man, you could all put everyone in a line and have it not be a perfect line, and have people's clothes be a little fucked up and to be a little more honest. I don't know. That's my kink.
I mean, I have a few thoughts about it. Certainly, I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here right now if it wasn't still working influencer marketing. So I do think some of it is generational, and what appealed to us for whatever reason just doesn't appeal to the current. Like you were right. Like there was that 4-year, 5-year span where it was authentic and real, and it meant something to us, and it's just changed and it's more polished, which is
right.
I guess not to say that it's not effective. It's just maybe not what we would consume in our everyday. But I also think, like, I just posted something on Instagram last week that like Gen Z is going to save us all.
Yeah. Oh,
like
they're the opposite.
Are flipping back.
Oh, 100%.
Right. Like it is getting so much more real. Like the stuff that my kids post on Be Real and like
all the Finsta and like, I
mean, there would never be any, like a single iota of anything fake.
Oh my God. No, totally. No, you're right. It's like, can you imagine? Like, no, it's all like memes, and you can barely even like see, like no one, everything's blurry. Like,
so I have a little bit of hope.
No, I agree. For sure.
So I mean, even before Hal was diagnosed and everything went down that you talk about in the memoir, like you had already kind of turned away from the sponsored content and were working on a screenplay. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, was it because you just felt like there wasn't a place for you anymore, or you wanted more consistency? I was over it?
I mean, obviously I stopped making the money that I was making. We all did. So it was kind of like, okay, I'm working my ass off. I'm writing for like 40 different pub websites now. Like at my height, I wasn't just blogging for myself. I was writing for so many different other places. I was posting 3 times daily on Babbel at the height of Babbel. I was posting once on mom.me a week. So I was writing daily on my site, 3 times for another site. I mean, I was writing like 10 pieces a week. Like it was unsustainable. And so when the money started, shifting, and when it started going more to social media and just changing. And I was exhausted anyway. My kids were getting older. So I wasn't really writing about my older kids. I mean, I wasn't really writing about them at all at that point. Very rarely. But, my little ones were starting to get older too. And I was like, I knew that I wasn't going to be writing about my experience as a mother, like, forever. So it just sort of felt like it just organically sort of fell off. Like nothing really happened. It was just like kind of like a slow decline. And then, and then I started working on other projects that I'd really been working on all along, but was like, I'm going to focus on these. And I was trying to make a film, which timing wise, that's like, I could do like 17 podcasts on what happened with that project, which is hopefully it'll pick up at some point. But it was like every terrible thing to happen happened during that time, including Hal's diagnosis with cancer and then his death. But yeah, I had already sort of, I was ready. I mean, I wonder, I don't know how many of us who started are still really doing it. I mean, not to the extent that we were.
I actually accidentally found someone who I used to follow all the time. I discovered last night that she was still blogging, and I totally fell into her blog for over an hour last night, just voraciously catching it. And I was like, oh my gosh, she was just talking about her life and what's going on and like this struggle. And it was like super, super old school. And
I love it.
Delicious. Sounds cheesy, but
no, not at
yummy.
All.
I was
oh my gosh, totally. Yeah. Well, and I know people who've recently kind of picked it back up with Substack and stuff. I think Substack is as close as we have to the way it was, because it is, it's like embracing long form again. And I've thought about starting a Substack like 400 times. And I'm like, just the idea of feeling obligated to write, a couple times a week is just, I think it's overwhelming. I think I was writing so much and I was putting out so much content for so many years that because the pressure that you put on yourself, or at least I did, I was like, I need to be posting. And that was one of the reasons why I think my blog was so successful, is because I was literally like giving birth and like writing while like still bleeding out, I remember the twins had just been born. They were in the NICU and I was literally blogging. I was still numb from like the waist down, and I had my laptop like propped up on my computer, and I'd like just given birth, and I was like, hey guys, like just gave birth. It like really hurt. Like I'm my C-section, like the recovery's been brutal. Like BRB, I got to go to the NICU and say hi to my twins. Like I was writing about it. I wasn't like, now I think people do like they TikTok or they do films, but like I was actively like writing an essay like in bed still, because there was like this fear that if I didn't keep talking and didn't keep writing and didn't keep sharing, that people would leave. And that was my livelihood. And it sort of becomes this like addiction, like, oh God, well, and it's, you're dependent on it financially.
Yeah. I mean, you become a slave to the beast.
You do. Really. And you have to keep people coming back and back and back and back and back. And, there is no such thing as maternity leave for a mommy blogger, which is like ironic, right? Like it doesn't exist. And I had no breaks for years. Like I wrote over the weekends, I would go on a trip, and then the trip was part of my content. And I definitely don't want to go back to that. Like I don't want to do that again. But at the time I felt, it was amazing. And my kids got to go on these amazing trips because they were free. Their rooms were all, I didn't buy a single crib for children, and none of the cribs I had to pay for, and none of their strollers and it was all, that was amazing. I don't even know how much things cost, because it was like, did like a thing with Graco or whomever. I remember like when I stopped writing, when I stopped mommy blogging, essentially having to buy things was like it was like humbling experience, because I was like, oh shit, like I didn't know that this is how much this stuff costed. Because there was so much of it that was just they would just be sent to me,
It's like when I left Edelman and started my own company, I was like, wait, I have to write my own emails? Like we had people to help.
Do it. Yeah, totally. Yeah. It was like, whoa, okay. God, man.
Yeah. Oh man, real life.
Yeah, totally. I have to buy my own trip to Hawaii next time.
What the hell?
That's why we haven't been to Hawaii, because I want to buy. So I feel really grateful. Like I have no regrets over that period of my life at all. I was so lucky to have been at the right place at the right time, which I know it was like all a timing thing. And I mean, I know like I did I did my job well, but I also, it was a right place at the right time thing. And I just feel really grateful and lucky that I got to do that for so many years. And yeah.
And I mean, I think people also feel grateful that they got to read it. Like I saw so many when your book came out 2 weeks ago, so many of the comments were like, I've been reading Rebecca for 10 years and I missed her voice. And I mean, I felt the same way, like just diving into it,
Thank
like
you.
I follow you on Instagram and I know how to reach you and catch up with you, but like it's just different.
Yeah.
And it felt like getting back to know an old friend. And
yeah, that's been like the most amazing thing about this too. It's like we all grew up together. Like I feel like I grew up sort of publicly because I started blogging at 19. I've been doing it really for even longer than I started Girls Gone Child in 2005. I was 23, but I started blogging before that for several years. So there are people that even, have reached out about this book who followed me pre-Girls Gone Child when I had a blog called The Pointy Toe Shoe Factory. I don't know if you know about that.
oh,
But my first blog,
was it a LiveJournal blog?
it was still Blogspot. It was Blogspot, and I wrote about like the shoe, it was like this sort of metaphor about like take a walk in my shoes, my pointy-toed shoes or whatever it was. It was like like a business card with like a high heel on it.
Of course.
And I wrote about traveling mainly because I was very into traveling for like the 1 year that I was an adult before I got pregnant. There are people that picked up my book who are Pointy-Toe Shoe Factory readers. So
it's amazing. I love it.
It's like, that's been really amazing is the people like the OGs, the people who've been around from the beginning. And also like, they're so loving and protective of me and like worried. And, there's a lot of love in the room.
Yeah.
A lot of hate too, but a lot.
Sure. But I mean, people can tell that you are putting so much of yourself out there. And I think for those who aren't assholes, there's this appreciation and this desire to you're providing so much, and there's this desire to protect that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. I feel the same way. I mean, I would feel the same way. So
yeah. We talked about the fact that I think your blog was so successful commercially because you did share so much. And for anyone who's read the book, like it's so vulnerable and open. And
thank you.
You talk about, I'm trying to figure out how to sum it up for those who haven't. Well, everyone should just go read it. But Rebecca's husband was diagnosed with cancer and died just a few months later. And this book is about that, but then it's also about your life after and the fact that your marriage was kind of breaking up before he was diagnosed. Yeah. And so you actually ended up feeling like you were in a better place afterwards.
Yeah.
Despite the horrible circumstances. And that's not what people typically write about in grief books, but like true to form, you were sharing how you were feeling and what was really going on. And just like with all of us, when we had babies, feeling like we didn't want to be alone and no one was talking about the awful stuff. Like it's so important that you put that out, and just reading what people are taking from your book and seeing how you've impacted people. Do you ever question whether you want to share so much, or is that just like, of course you have to?
I think, of course, I have to. I've always felt compelled to share. I mean, I've been doing this since my teens. Like I wrote about breakups at 15 years old. And it's funny because I remember when those stories started getting published in like the Chicken Soup books, and I was literally writing about all of my breakups in high school, not even really thinking if my ex-boyfriends were going to read them or if they were going to care. It was like, I changed their names, obviously, but I wasn't like afraid or worried. This was very much like, I'm just writing about my experience. Like, this is what happened to me. This book really, it's not unlike how it felt to start a blog about being a parent, because what was happening and what I was writing about in those early years was the duality of being human mother, was the love I felt for my child, but also the want to run away sometimes. It was not unlike this book that I wrote. I mean, I've basically been writing the same story forever, which is that it's complicated. Right? Like it's complicated being a mother. It's complicated being a widow. And I think, again, like going back to like what influencer culture has become, this idea that you completely like, you filter all the truth out of the story. And what do you have? You have nothing. And for me, the reason I was able to love my kids the way I love them and to write about my kids loving them the way I did was also because I also was writing about the things that drove me crazy about being a mother and the stuff that I wanted to get away from. People keep asking me like, what do your kids think of your book? Or how are people receiving this? And it's like, this this has always been the way that I've written about my life. I've always held space for all of the different conflicting feelings. And I think that's why people have read my stuff for so long and why they still do, and why I, feel like I can write about these things, because I've been doing it my whole life. Maybe not to this extent. I wrote this book for the same reason I started a blog. I did not know anybody who was going through what I was going through. Like, I had no peers. And I read the parenting books, and I got all the what to expect, all the things that whatever the early aughts parenting books were, nothing was relatable to me. And after Hal died, I was reading, books about being widows and, obviously Year of Magical Thinking and all the different books that people were throwing at me. Mm-hmm. And none of them are relatable to me again. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I got to write my own then. Because my experience was not the perfect, like, oh, I'm so glad to be a mother. No, I didn't want to be a mother. I got pregnant unexpectedly. I became widowed unexpectedly. Both of these situations were not planned. That doesn't mean that I didn't love my child and I'm so like, he's my life. That didn't mean that I loved my husband at one point. I didn't when he, at the end. And, these are not abnormal stories. These are very common situations, and yet we don't hear from them, or we don't talk about them because, it's taboo to talk about something that no one else is talking about, which is why we have to keep talking about it, because the more we talk about it and the more we normalize all the very real feelings, that come with being a mother, that come with being a wife, then suddenly there's no taboo and shame and guilt anymore. And I feel like, as a mommy blogger, that was always my intention, was like, how do you normalize an experience lovingly, but honestly?
Yeah, because there's so much that's like, it's supposed to be so amazing and wonderful. And then you feel guilt that you're like, I remember feeling like who is this vampire like sucking all the lifeblood out of me? Am I ever going to be myself again? And I'm so miserable. And all I was reading in these books, it was, like, enjoy this magical time. And
right.
You should be so happy. And when you're not, where is there to go with it? It's so helpful to people to read the truth, whether it's motherhood or widowhood or whatever it is that they're going through.
Totally. And women, especially women and mothers, there's so much shame. Even in those early years, like, we had the mommy wars, and it was like article after article after article criticizing us for everything. We were breastfeeding was wrong. Formula feeding was wrong. I remember I wrote an essay or a blog post or something about how my twins would not sleep on their backs. They would only sleep on their stomachs. And it became this thing where it was like, people were like, I'm calling CPS on you. Like, you don't deserve to be a mother. Like, your children are going to die and you're going to deserve it. Like, whoa, man. And I remember people being like, thank you so much for writing about that. Like, me too. Like, my children can't sleep they can only sleep on their stomachs too. And anyways, it was like, that was what was happening. It was like, oh my God, people were seriously coming for each other for the way they let their child sleep. And then there was like, you're going to die and it's your fault. And it was that kind of stuff just made me want to double down and write about all the times I was letting my children sleep on their stomachs because somebody had to, right? Like, somebody had to.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't think I could have written this book if I didn't have 20 years of having that feeling of somebody needs to do this. Somebody needs to write this. It's important. It's real. It's true. Like, there's nothing wrong with putting my children to sleep on their stomachs. It's the only way they can sleep. They have to sleep. And I think that, that sort of carried me all those years, and why I felt compelled to keep writing about, writing honestly and knowing that people are going to be critical. I feel like I want to make it easier for my daughters. I want to make it easier for other women who feel like they can't come forward or be truthful or have to hide. And I'm like willing to like front lines it, like that's what this book has felt like.
Vision of you like leading this like crew of women, and you're like,
I don't feel like I'm it's not like that. Like, I don't really, it's not that heroic. My point is that it shouldn't be heroic. It shouldn't be heroic to be honest. And the you're so brave almost feels like a backhanded compliment, because what people are saying is like, I wouldn't do that. Like, I'm not going to go there. Like, and why not? Like, why? It shouldn't be brave. It shouldn't be. But I also understand why why, no one wanted to write about putting their babies on their stomachs, because no one wants to get death threats. No one wants to be called a terrible person or a terrible mother. Certainly, oh my God, like the worst thing that you could possibly be is a bad mother. So I get that.
I, for one, am glad that you put it out there and take the heat for everyone else. And I don't know how to close it up, but I just want to thank you for the book. And
Thank you.
I loved reading it, and everyone I know who has read it has felt the same way. And it was amazing to get to just read your voice again, and so nice to see
So
you
good to
and
see
have
you
you
too.
here.
Thank you for having me.
And I hope that, yes, of course. And I hope that everyone will go by and read all of this by Rebecca Woolf, and they can follow you on Instagram, and you're at Rebecca Woolf with 3 O's on Instagram. And then you are still at Girls Gone Child
on Twitter. Yeah. And you can go to my website, which is just RebeccaWolf.com, and that's linked to all the things too.
Perfect. And you have a new column on Romper called Sex and the Single Mom.
Yes. And it's bi-weekly, although the month of September it's weekly, but usually it's bi-weekly.
Okay. Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
for having me,
Danielle. Your face. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Please check back next Monday for a new episode featuring marketing conversations through the lens of influence. I am your host, Danielle Wiley, and this is The Art of Sway.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Tanya Daka hosts a great podcast called The Copy Arena. Tanya, tell us what these fine folks will get out of listening.
What they're going to get is down-to-earth copy advice that helps them get their readers to open and take action.
Amazing. Where can people subscribe?
They can subscribe at tanyadaka.com and anywhere you find your favorite podcasts.
Or on marketingpodcasts.net.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.